During a practice session, attendees cannot join until you start the webinar.
You want to share the screen first before you start the webinar. Get everything up then. When you want it.
You can move these around, right?
Yeah, I don't think you can drag them around.
No?
No. Did you want to put it?
I have to start. Oh, here it is. You can keep on. No, it's sharing the screen already.
Did you want to hit that though?
Okay. Finally,
I don't know if you wanted that.
That sounds good.
nice. Did she took it through down.
Okay, pull that down. I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all just kind of standing at the ready. The training
There
that
we
I
go.
sent out to everybody
We were waiting for Wells.
Oh, okay, good.
Who else? Hello.
All right, welcome everyone. And we're going to call to order a special public hearing tonight, first on today, September 22nd. The agenda should be in front of you, and we're going to start with the call to order, and the time is 7 o'clock on the dot.
So Holly is absent. St. Clair,
Here,
Gallegos,
Here.
Price.
Here.
Fingerhut, here. Erickson.
Here.
And DuPont, absent.
right, so since this is a public hearing, we're first going to have discussion and presentation on the e-learning program, followed by citizens' comments. So thank you, Dan, and
No problem. All right,
and welcome everyone.
ready?
Yep.
All right, good evening. Today we're going to talk about the adoption of our e-learning program resolution so that we can use this in lieu of emergency days when we come back to in-person instruction. Oh, sorry, I'm starting before you got my slideshow. Go to the second one. Great. This is one of the steps that we have to take. All districts across the state have to take prior to approving the resolution that you'll talk about later. Next slide, please. So we're talking about the difference first between remote instruction, which is what we're currently in, and an e-learning program. So remote instruction, that's what we have due to the COVID pandemic. It's our current instructional program. And all that needs to be done is approved by the superintendent. When we talk about an e-learning program, this was something that the state put out that we can use when we're in person, if we have a snow day or an emergency closing due to the power being out, although that probably would not be a good e-learning day as we have found out. It would be very tough. So tonight we're really going to be focused on that part of it and not the remote instruction. Next slide, please. There are some criteria that are in the school code for this. The first part of it really comes down to access and making sure we have access for all of our students. As we've demonstrated both in March and currently, we are committed to making sure that all of our students have the supplies they need, whether it's electronic. We've made sure that we have Chromebooks for everybody or iPads. And we've made sure that we have Wi-Fi for those who need it, but also paper pencil. And we've demonstrated that with our paper pencil program back in March, April, May. And then also with our packet and supply pickups that we do every other week or every 3 weeks, I think, at one of our schools. Next slide, please. These are some of the other criteria, and we're just going to go through some of these. In your packet, you have a more thorough list where it highlights where in our parent handbook and our staff handbook, as well as other artifacts that we've done all of these criteria. The first one and foremost, making sure that we have a 5-hour school day that is consistent with being in person, just making sure it is in the remote setting, or sorry, in the e-learning setting. That does not have to be 5 hours of synchronous or real-time instruction. That can be a mix of real-time and on-demand instruction. You'll see as you go down the bullets, the next two are about access and making sure that's what students have is within their control. Providing our notice to parents, that is our communication. We're in constant communication with our parents. Ensuring our staff has access to the technology. We are a couple days away from completing our refresh of our technology for our teachers. And then providing professional development. And so a quick kudos to our teachers. We held a remote learning workshop a couple of days before the first Institute Day. We had over 130 participants working with our coaches, working with other people in teaching and learning to make sure that we had a successful launch to our remote instruction for the school year. We'll periodically be reviewing our program, just like we would do our remote instruction program. We'll be sending out surveys to parents and our staff over the next couple of weeks. The plan is mutually agreed upon between all of our MIA members who have been part of the planning process. And then lastly, making sure that everybody's informed about the expectations. And so we have both a staff and a parent handbook, which outlines the expectations for our families, and it's available for parents in both English and in Spanish as well. And then we've also had some Q&As along the way, so people are very familiar with what the expectations are going to be. And so with that, I'm going to move to ask the board if they have any questions, and then we'll go into public comment. Yes.
So are the expectations materially different than the current expectation?
And
Okay. So I guess then one of the side benefits, if you will, of having to do distance learning is that we determined that we actually can do this because we had considered potentially doing this 2 years ago or whatever and didn't think maybe we could do it very well.
the nice thing about this is it's a 3-year plan that we have, and our changes, and we can make our changes as we go along. We discussed that at the county curriculum directors meeting, and one of the ROE people were there to confirm that we can make changes at any time.
Modify it, so,
Okay.
Are there any other board questions? Okay, thank you, Dan. At this time, we'll move into public comment, and I'm just going to read a brief statement about how the public comment section works. The Board of Ed, we welcome your citizen input. Citizens are reminded to limit comments to 3 minutes. And we also remind people that matters regarding employees or confidential student issues should not be brought up, nor will we respond to them. We're going to first, we have people online, but we're going to first take the comments from the people present. Just to let the people online know, we will be asking for you to raise your hand at the appropriate moment and give you guidance on that. If you haven't signed a sign-in sheet, please feel free to state your name, your full name before speaking.
Lisa, please
Yes?
make sure this public comment is specifically for the e-learning.
Okay, good point. Yeah, so following this public comment section or this special presentation, we will be conducting a regular board meeting. So if you have comments around other topics, please save them, stick around, and we welcome your comments on other topics at that time. So first in the room, we have Deborah Barnes. Seconded. Okay, thank you. So Deborah, thank you for coming anyway. Is there anybody else present in the room that would like to speak about her e-learning? No? Okay, so hold on 1 second. We're going to check online.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's speaking about e-learning, I don't know, asking about how that we can shorten screen time and stuff like that. Is that gonna count as a speaking of e-learning? Because I would probably have a few comments that is not, the speech is not common.
If you would like to make a brief statement about your e-learning experience, that would be fine.
I mean,
Please
Go to form.
thank you.
come to the podium, state your name.
Miss Barnes.
My name is Katarzyna Smolska Dubois, and I'm a parent of 2 children attending Washington School. And I mean, the experience of e-learning is like, I think teachers are amazing and they work super hard. And I am a teacher myself, so I know how much work they have to put it into e-learning. Although I don't think on elementary level it's possible actually to succeed in a matter. Like my kids who are both excellent students, like were excited about it at the beginning, they cry every time they have to do it now and hate it. I think part of it is apparently the time on Zoom. I'm really concerned about very, very long time on screen. My child already has developing weird, I don't know, behavior tics from being over screened. As a teacher and as a person, as a parent, I was always reminded that screen time shouldn't exceed for a child that age 2 hours up to 4 hours the top. Right now, kids are almost 4 or 5 hours on a screen. It's really concerning for me. I understand we have to protect each other, but in my opinion, the hours are very long. Kids are exhausted. I understand the teachers don't really want to stop Zoom meetings because they might just lose the students, and to reconnect takes half an hour or 40 minutes, and I get it. Although for kids that age, because it's very different if you work with high schooler or very different if you work with middle school, for elementary school, for kids who never really done it and whose brain are not really shouldn't be exposed for hours to the screens, it's really challenging. And I can see behavioral changes. I'm concerned about it, really. I think more worksheets maybe a little different plan, maybe some part of, especially, I mean, it's like my kids are also frustration. I mean, I understand teachers do what they can, but PE education with short video and then you redo and throwing the ball 20 times and recording it, it's not the PE. I would rather get directions what to do with my child on a backyard, and I do it. I mean, and this is, like I said, teachers are fantastic. They communicate, they spend hours emailing us as a parent, and this is like, I want to show my full appreciation. Yeah, my other speech probably will be after we move from e-learning to chances for hybrid, because I'm not sure how you guys feel about it. Although I am a teacher who is working currently with students, and I work in a private school, 400 students, we had no outbreaks. So maybe some ideas would be worth sharing. Because I just think like it's very different with older students who can focus, who are used to being online forever with games and with stuff, who can maybe even focus better than in a classroom. But for kids under 10, it's really difficult to learn. Plus they learn, I mean, for me, doing apps, switching stuff, what about their fine motor skills? What about their holding pen skills? What about their using stuff? I mean, these kids, this is their only opportunity until about the 3rd, 4th grade when they're gonna stop completely using pencils and they're just gonna move on to typing their essays. So this is their only chance. My daughter is in a kindergarten and it makes me cry to see how much she hates school right now. I'm sorry, but that's her first big experience.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. So.
Adjourn if you want. No further questions.
Are there any further questions online or requests to comment?
We don't see any.
Okay, so thank you again for your comments. There are no further questions coming from online. So we will adjourn this public hearing, and if there's no further business, I can have a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All right.
Price,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson.
Aye.
Dupont is absent. Gallegos,
Aye.
Sinclair,
Aye.
and Holly is absent.
And we're adjourned at 7:13 p.m. All right, we're going to move right into the regular board meeting now, and I'd like to call the Mundelein Elementary School District board meeting on September 22nd to order, and we'll now call the roll at 7:14.
Holly is absent. Sinclair,
Here.
Price,
Here.
Erickson.
Here.
Dupont is absent. Fingerhut, here. Gallegos.
Here.
All right. Per usual, we next have citizens' comments, and now I believe, Deborah, would you like to speak?
Yeah, it's just might be recording.
And again, we'll just remind every speaker to keep their comments to 3 minutes and keep to topics that can be discussed. Well, you know, we like.
I've been to Toastmasters.
So I'm here to speak about the Zoom recordings that are going on in these schools right now. I'm grateful right now, working with Principal Drake, that she is not recording my daughter, because I've asked explicitly not to have my daughter recorded. I've also filled out paperwork in the past about not having pictures posted online. And I just want, I'm not sure if the school district's aware of the security and privacy concerns regarding Zoom sessions being recorded and distributed. Because unless there's some movement for the distribution of the Zoom recording links to be tracked by the IT department as to who it's being sent to, and then there's a tracker put on that, once it leaves the school, it's at liberty to anybody who gets the link. A teacher could, you know, just a small example before I get to my statistics of the link could go from parent A to parent B who's in a homeschool Facebook group, and that link goes on Facebook, and then all of a sudden that link is in a public forum data that is now owned by Facebook, and nobody has access to it. We don't know who is going to be looking at our children. Our children's names are on there, their faces and their voices. One thing I want to bring to the awareness of the school board is that there's been a rise in obviously desktop video conferencing, mostly using Zoom by schools and religious institutions. But keep in mind that more than 500,000, 500,000 Zoom credentials are for sale on the dark web at roughly a penny a login ID. So keep in mind that this is not, we're not in an isolated situation here. There's been a 2,000% increase in malicious files with Zoom in the name at the start of COVID back in the spring. I also want to point out that as of today, it's revealed that education is still the most vulnerable sector, accounting for 60% of malware attacks. In addition, it showed that ransomware accounts for approximately 80% of malware infections in education, up from 48% in 2019. So I'm giving those statistics to let you all know that school districts are a target. Just a small amount of research I've done, you know, Connecticut, California, Texas, and Virginia all had issues with ransomware attacks in the school district. A lot of this is because, you know, schools are setting up this technology very rapidly without a lot of control systems and security, and that becomes a major factor for security issues. Additionally, gosh, that was quick. You know, I've got some research stating that teachers, that any images or recordings that include students' faces, names, or names make these materials an educational record according to FERPA. So there are strict FERPA rules regarding around how photos and videos can be accessed, stored, and shared. I sent the school districts a few ideas on how we can, and I talked to Principal Drake about how we can maybe allow students to view Zoom sessions without actually getting the links. You know, we could have some sort of Google share that's locked down, or for instance, parents may get read access only. They can view it, but they can't take the file. And then we're not as concerned about those files migrating across the world. So I'm up here to ask that we do not record students' Zoom sessions without getting parental permission, due to the fact that Illinois is a two-party state, and without consent from parents regarding minors. That is against legal action in the state of Illinois. So I have not been provided any consent to the schools about allowing my daughter to be recorded during Zoom sessions. I got a notification saying that they will be recorded, and please don't pass them out, but we have no control over that. So I want to make sure that we are aware that, you know, I am doing decently with my child at home with the e-learning. I think it's a great opportunity for, you know, business continuity and disaster recovery to have an option in case, you know, there's issues with a septic tank or the school burning down or something happening where we can't be in person. It's a great option, and I agree with it. But we need to take in mind that our children are the ones that don't understand what's going on. So we need to protect them. I'm here to protect my daughter. I'm here to make sure that, you know, she doesn't get recorded without my permission, because I'm the one that's responsible until she's 18 for what happens to her. And I need to make sure my daughter is not a victim of
Thank
any
you.
type of issues.
Any closing?
I have a lot.
Quickly. Well, we need to check to see if we have.
Yeah,
others too,
I've
so.
gotten, Mr. Buchesh, who's the Director of Educational Technology out of Rhode Island. He suggests that students should not be recorded. If a lesson needs to be recorded, that teachers should record only parts where they are speaking and refrain from capturing any audio or video of the students before the class or during follow-up discussions. And that we encourage, you know, teachers to just do Zoom videos of themselves if they need to provide any instruction to students.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anybody online that would like to comment? We're gonna check that system now.
I'll check that.
We'd see it here.
No.
Okay, then we're gonna close public comments.
I'm sorry, can I just ask you questions? When it's gonna be a meeting regarding, like, are we as Mandalay schools going to leave them concerned hybrid like other school districts do? And when it's gonna happen?
Kevin, do you have any comment on future plans and when the public might be involved?
There's a lot of school districts all over us who starting in October, so.
So we have meetings going on right now with union representation and administration to set up those meetings. As far as the timetable that incorporate bringing the parents in, no, that has not been discussed yet.
Okay, so can you just make sure we be informed on time, because, you know, I'm considering that maybe quitting my job and taking a homeschooling, because it's gonna take forever. As the parents, we need a frame to know what's going on. I know as a fact that these 5 or 7 school districts who are going to try, in Algonquin, in Crystal Lake, in Mount Prospect, in Des Plaines, they're starting all hybrid.
Yeah, there's a lot on the table, so we'll certainly keep everybody informed. So with that, I'm gonna ask if the board has any questions about the packets that were unanswered before we go into presentations. Okay. So next up will be our District 75 reports, and we will now hear the report from the business office.
Good evening. Tonight, first on our agenda for the business office would be the 2020 levy that we are providing to you for discussion purposes. This is not where we are at the adoption level or anything like that. This is simply the proposed estimated levy. In terms of our timeline, from here we will go to the estimated levy. That will happen in the October board meeting. Then we will actually have a truth and taxation hearing, even though we're not required to because we're below the threshold. Our district has historically held those public hearings just for transparency purposes. That will occur in November, as well as the adoption of the levy in November. In your packet, you should have seen that what we're proposing right now is an extension of 4.9%. That's our proposed extension. That does not mean that's what's going to be extended. What we're expecting to actually be extended is a 2.5% increase on those items that are tax capped, or a 2.9% total increase for the entire levy. How does that translate to your tax bill? It's estimated that if we go that, or if we receive the 2.9% increase that we're estimating, for every $100,000 of home that you own, that's about a $36 tax increase. So that's what we're looking at this point. So why, the question always comes, why do we ask for 4.9 if we are expecting 2.9? And that is happening because there's only one piece of information that's known right now, and that's CPI for next year. The rest of the pieces of information that determine our levy, which would be EAV, our assessed valuation, and new growth, as well as a couple other factors, won't be known until April. of 2021. But we're still required to file these documents now. So filing the 4.9% versus the 2.9 gives us the ability to have flexibility in filing the actual levy at the end of the day. So say we get to April and we realize we need an extra $100,000 in IMRF versus the education fund. If we bind ourselves to this 2.9%, that could limit us in terms of where we need to move the money in the future, as well as if new growth or any of those other things that we've estimated right now come in differently. So right now, again, what you have in your packet is your estimated aggregate tax levy, the proposed estimate. Next board meeting, we will be asking for board adoption of the estimated aggregate tax levy. There's no action required. This is simply a discussion item, and I believe I answered any questions that the board had in the prior or in the Monday questions. Anything else?
Anything further? Thank you, T.
Well, I didn't have it in minutes, so if you need it. So we're assuming that the new growth declines to about $750,000.
Correct.
And that's based on
History.
what input?
Just history. We were very, very close to the actual, what it actually ended up being last year.
Mhm.
We go on history. I generally will look at historical increases, but if you look at our prior increases, they're significantly higher. So I then take the lower values, look at those as well as last year's actual activity to determine our estimated for this year. Again, if it comes in higher, if it comes in lower, we have given ourselves the room to be able to levy to the full extent.
I was just wondering, because I'm not aware of any materially large new homes being constructed.
Correct.
In terms of number of homes that are in our district, I don't think, but that would normally be what would increase the construction.
So on to the next.
On to the next item. So the next item you have in your agenda is our IGA that we're proposing with the Lake County Regional Office of Education for the Lake County CARES Act. You have, just because we're required to file several documents with the county in order to receive these funds, you have the IGA in your packet. Again, I've had a chance to answer any questions that the board proposed previously, but the bottom line is this is a around $51,000, yes, $51,000 opportunity for us to receive reimbursement for those things that we have spent related to COVID. And that's mainly boiling down to PPE. If you look at the files that are attached, you'll see that the documents show that we've spent $58,000. That's more so that we can make sure, again, that we maximize our collection of the reimbursement. So we're asking for board adoption on that tonight.
That 51,000 number was what was determined by the county as to what we were able and eligible to apply for. So we have applied for 100% of what we are eligible to apply for. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Any additional questions? Okay, the next item on our agenda is the FY21 Tri-District Shared Services Agreement at Lincoln for Lincoln services as well as our ECAT services. This is our regular annual agreement that we are asking the board to adopt. It incorporates our estimates for the year as well as our billing structure. The only major change from prior years is the section that discusses a waiver of rental fees to those, to basically Hawthorne and Fremont for COVID related, like if they're not going to be in the building. So that's the major change from prior years till this year.
Are Hawthorne and Fremont using any of the classrooms to do e-learning?
At this point, I believe the answer is no, but as they bring children back into the buildings, we will obviously be eliminating any kind of a credit that we're offering to them.
So it's based on children, and that's my question though, is it based on children in the building or teachers in the building? Because I know.
Children in the building at this point. And so if they bring back one child, then it's going away because we don't have a program that's set up based on 21 kids or 10 kids or whatever.
Just curious.
Well, so if they brought back special education programs similar to what we're talking about doing some of in person, we're thinking it would be proportional to the number of Zooms that they need?
Not at this point, only because I believe that due to COVID-related guidelines and how much they're gonna have to spread out, they're gonna use the same number of rooms either way. And we have Jamie nodding her head back there.
Okay.
So, again, that's,
Right,
we
well,
didn't
yeah.
have to do this either. I thought that this
No,
was
I
a
think
great
it's quite fair.
opportunity
Yeah.
for us to really work with the two districts.
Right. Okay.
And I believe those are my only items on the agenda until closed session.
I believe you're correct.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
And now we have Dan returning.
Okay. Yep, so we heard the report on the resolution for an e-learning program. I did want to address one of the public comments about screen time. We do know that screen time needs to be addressed for all of our students. We just, this past Friday, had a professional development in which we worked with teachers to talk about activities that could be done with asynchronous or on demand. And making sure that this will be a continued area that we'll be addressing in all of our professional development moving forward. This is new for us all, and our teachers, like was stated, are doing a wonderful job, but there's always room for where we can improve.
Is there any plans for small groups meeting or outdoors meeting at all for kids to socialize even with social distancing at all, even like small groups or?
So the meeting's
Oh,
designed for the
Yeah,
board.
and just to let everyone know, public comments are supposed to be at the front of the meeting, and so then the board business can proceed
I'm sorry, it's
unin-
my first
uninhibited.
meeting, I totally don't
That's okay,
understand.
that's okay.
I'm just really.
Yeah, it's different than like a town hall setting, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
mostly basically for us to obtain information from you in the public comment session, and then from the administration and the rest of the meeting.
I just thought it's gonna be more like, do you guys? gonna
Yeah,
follow
yeah,
through
no,
on
if you have
practice
additional
versus-
comments, maybe
Okay.
email, the superintendent or a principal or
That's good.
things like that, and they'll be happy to follow up at that time.
So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take them, or we can move on.
I don't think so. Does anybody on the board have a question?
Well, so what's the goal to, as you say, there's modification of trying to think about how much screen time is, what's the goal to move to?
In our staff and parent handbook,
Yeah.
we have 2.5 hours at the minimum.
Okay.
We're gonna work on a case-by-case basis based on the needs of the students.
Okay.
This was a professional development that our teachers asked for,
Right.
and that's where we started.
So I know from, and I'd say this to you, Wells, because you don't currently have kids that are going through the system, so you're not interacting with the teachers on a daily
So
basis.
actually, so I and my wife are interacting with our kindergarten granddaughter, doing Zoom stuff. So
Okay.
I
Yes,
appreciate it. I think I have some appreciation, not all 5 days, but
I absolutely was not saying that you didn't have appreciation, but just sharing with you, I know, having attended all of the virtual bring your parent to school days and the curriculum nights and all the questions and answers and all of that, all of the teachers have expressed that at the beginning of the year, we expect there to be more online because we're trying to teach everyone the routines and doing all of this. But everyone keeps talking about a gradual release of responsibility, and I've started to see that. Not every day is perfect, but it's getting better. And in a lot of cases, at least in my household, there is a lot of fine motor skills and work going on while they have their headphones on and are listening to the teacher, kind of like independent work in a normal classroom setting. So they're not sitting and staring the whole time, but it's easier sometimes for the teachers to then rein everybody back in when it's time, rather than as often happens is when they say, go take a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break, 15 minutes later, we see my kid wandering around and we're like, whoa, go back in. They don't have a concept of how long that is, and then it takes a long time. So I think they're working to get back to a 2.5, time frame, but I think some of the kids still need to learn what those breaks look like and how that works and doing that. But in my experience, the teachers are very accommodating with when that kid clearly needs a break, we're letting it happen. And there's not consequences at this point. So.
yeah, we have big pencils and turn the page over so that this. You can see what's on the page.
So I'm just sharing my experience now.
Yeah,
Right.
normally I wouldn't have that experience.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Next we have Human Resources. Shane? How are you?
I'm well. Good evening. It's been a while since I've been at the podium.
Welcome back.
I have 2 items to share with you tonight. The first is an update regarding the district's PARA committee. So PARA is an abbreviation for the Performance Evaluation Review Act. This act gives districts local control to establish what mechanism they will use to evaluate instructional staff. The PARA committee is made up of equal members of the administration and the MIA teaching union. We got together to evaluate what is the best evaluation tool to use in a time of remote and possibly hybrid learning, since it was not originally built for this type of environment. And had a very productive meeting, and what we agreed to is that tenured teachers will default to their prior year's rating, and that is consistent with the governor's executive order and the Illinois School Code. However, non-tenured teachers will receive a full evaluation. We agreed that we would not have any evaluations begin until after October 1st to give as much time as possible to allow teachers to acclimate to the new environment, that if there's any type of technical disruption, bad Wi-Fi connection, anything like that, the day that they're being observed, that would be a complete wash and we would start over again. And then there was a change made to equally distribute the 4 different categories of the Danielson rating. That it was offset. One of the Danielson criteria was 40%, and I will defer to my colleagues that actually deal with the evaluation piece as to why that was technically so, but we decided that it would be better in this environment to have all of those 4 evaluation categories have equal value. The second item I have to share with you tonight is an update regarding the unsatisfactory evaluation appeal process. So a change in state law required each district to come up with a plan that if a teacher received an unsatisfactory evaluation, that there was an appeal process that they could follow to challenge that appeal. And so again, working with MIA membership, we identified a process in which 2 administrators and 1 MIA member would serve as a review panel, that the instructor who is seeking to appeal an unsatisfactory evaluation would have 14 days for them to prepare that appeal and share that with the committee. The committee would then interview the instructor and the evaluator and gather any other evidence that they found to be appropriate to make their decisions. And then they would issue a formal finding that would be final. So both opportunities to have this discussion were done in about 2.5 hours, very collaborative process, and have been memorialized in an MOU as an addendum to the current collective bargaining agreement. Any questions?
So the appeal of the rating does not involve any additional observation?
No, it's just a review of the observations that were conducted by, in this case, it'd be the building principal.
Previously done.
Yeah.
Okay.
For those of us not yet having gone through the collective bargaining process as a board member, can you refresh for us how long is a tenured teacher been with our district to be tenured?
So it's 4 years. So the non-tenured teachers are 1 to 4 years, and so that is those teachers that have been in the district that long would receive an informal observation, a formal observation, and they would receive feedback based on both of that as well, so that they can improve their performance as we continue through the evaluation process.
And So will tenured teachers be even informally reviewed at all, or
Yes.
is it just?
Yes, no, tenured instructors would be informally reviewed and provided feedback.
So if you could say in a nutshell, what's the difference between an informal and a formal?
So an informal and a formal, the process is largely the same, but the informal means that I can give you constructive feedback that you can then take to make adjustments before the formal process. So it's an opportunity for you to identify any weaknesses that need to be addressed before the formal process, and then the formal process is the formal process.
And it's documented, so informal is more undocumented?
Informal is documented because there is an exchange between the instructor, the evaluator and the instructor, and that is done in writing. And the instructor can write formal comments back if they disagree. I did it, something for this reason. So it is an interactive process, but it is all formally documented to show the evolution of a process. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to head into different topics now under the heading of superintendent report, but I understand Jamie's going to talk first about special ed.
Sorry, Jamie, give me 1 second. It closed out.
While we're waiting, first, good evening. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to present with you our process to phase into some in-person instruction for some of our students with IEPs. We're super excited about this process and have been putting in a lot of time to get it right. So, but before we get started, I know you hear from me sometimes, I want to introduce this dynamic duo that I could not live without and do my job without. They're amazing. And there are student services coordinators in different buildings. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Laura Ehas. I'm the student services coordinator at Mechanics World in Carlson. And hi, I'm Sunisa Mensa, and I'm at Washington and Mac.
So together, we're going to present to you what special education has looked like in this remote time. So that is our phase A. When we're talking tonight, we're talking about phase A is the right now phase. And then we're going to transition into phase B, which is the grouping that we are having return to in-person on October 5th. So with that, I'll start in this journey from March, when we closed schools for in-person, until present. We have been working diligently with our team members and our stakeholders and really prioritizing these goals. So to maximize opportunities for engagement during remote and hybrid learning, prioritizing in-person instruction for students that have the most intensive IEP services, expediting creative related service delivery, and we'll expand on that a little bit later, and meeting the legal requirements by implementing the IEP to the greatest extent possible, again, during times when we're not 100% in person. So those have been our goals and at the forefront of our planning during this time. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about our journey so far. Thanks. And then as far as who's been involved in the planning and kind of what that's looked like. So we have an awesome special education department in our district and really dedicated staff working in each of the buildings. So since the spring, we've been meeting regularly in team meetings by building, meetings that are job alike. So for example, all the speech pathologists together, all the mental health service providers together, and so on and so forth. Self-contained teachers versus resource level teachers, and just meeting in teams throughout the summer and up to presently for that collaboration and to hear that stakeholder input. Then I have the opportunity to work closely with our Lake County and a little bit beyond Lake County special ed director network. So that's been extremely helpful in this process for us to kind of compare the process to return to in-person and what that looks like, and provide tips for one another and look for some ways to be consistent as well. We've had excellent attorney guidance and professional development offered by our attorney firm. So that's been really exceptionally helpful during this time. And then finally, In addition to hosting a town hall specific to special education and getting feedback from parents along the way, formally and more formally or informally, we also sent a survey to our families and our self-contained, of students in our self-contained programs, those more intensive programs, to receive their feedback on what programming they felt best was for their individual students. And so we've had the opportunity to follow up conversations with individual families in this process as well. Next slide, please. Thank you.
So currently we're in what we call phase A, which is the 100% remote phase. And the district has been working to do some outreach and being able to gather some data for more effective instruction. So students have been entering the schools in certain protocols so that we can do some assessments. We've done this both for general education as well as special education to gather more current data on our students. We also have moved from the Google platform to the Zoom platform in terms of our teletherapy. So our related service providers are able to interact in different ways with our students receiving those services. Our IEP meetings are being held virtually at this time, and our staff is developing individualized remote learning plans, which is something I'll talk about a little bit more in a little later. And then we've also put in place something called driveway visits, and this is something that has been given to students who either have one-on-one paraprofessionals assigned to them on their IEPs, or they receive more than 80% of their day in special education. And what it looks like is that the paraprofessionals are going to visit the students for mutually agreed upon periods of time throughout the school day, and they meet with the students outside on their personal driveway or parking lot or somewhere outside of their home. And they meet with them either to keep them on track as the real-time instruction is going on, or they work with them when they're working on their asynchronous or their on-demand learning. And so those are being provided in special education in both levels, according to all of our guidelines, and then depending also on student need.
So moving to phase B, we identified that the group of students that we wanted to bring back in person was our self-contained special education students. So we began with surveying parents of students in that program, asking them who would elect in person versus who would elect remote, if we offered those two options to them. And 32 parents indicated that they would be interested in the in-person hybrid model, and 17 parents said they would like to continue with their child in remote. So with those 32 students, we are looking to bring back 2 classes at Lincoln for a total of 10 students. We're looking to bring back 2 classes at Washington for a total of 9 students, 2 classes at Mechanics Grove with 7 students, and 1 class at Carl Sandburg with 6 students. And looking at the times for the classes, we are having the early childhood program return in the morning from 8:30 to 11. That's their typical time of their school day. And then for our K through 8 in person, we would have them come 8:30 to 11:30. So our pre-K students will have 2.5 hours of in-person learning, and our K-8 students will have 3 hours of in-person learning. These are some mock schedules, so you can kind of get an idea of what the student day would look like. So the pink is their in-person learning time, where the blue is their remote learning time. The thing that is important across the 3 different pink times, what we're looking to do while they're in person is give every student an academic literacy time, every student an academic math time, and every student social emotional learning time during their in-person. And then in the afternoon when they're remote, that's when they'll have their specials or related arts classes and some other opportunities, particularly in science and social studies types of contents, and more of those asynchronous or on-demand learning times.
So within our district, we also have students who receive their IEP program in a private or public therapeutic day school. And the private schools are again locally. The public therapeutic days are the CEDAL programs that are available that are outside of our buildings. And so in working with the families and students and educational teams In this case, we've been working since the summer, early summer, in communication with those teams and with the families to understand their desires for in-person or remote, just like within our self-contained here. And in that process, really working to ensure all of the private and public therapeutic day schools are following the appropriate protocols, the ISB protocols, the health guidelines. And so really working in conjunction for that familiarity and making sure that families feel comfortable and have their questions answered. So Ms. Finn has been instrumental in this process. And we do have a couple students who have already returned in their private therapeutic day school to in-person instruction. And so this includes all facets of that transition. So from including the transportation vendors, making sure all of those compliance measures are set up for safety. So we've been, again, working closely with each of the schools and all of the families to ensure that the students are receiving what they need in the remote time or the hybrid time, as well as in person. So again, Ms. Finn has been instrumental in supporting that process as well.
So some additional considerations. Next slide. We are currently holding our IEP meetings. We're holding them virtually. We do legally have to offer, parents may opt for an in-person meeting, and we would make arrangements to accommodate that. But the majority of our meetings are being held via Zoom currently. Attendance at this meeting is being virtually documented in the IEP notes that we take at every meeting. However, Zoom has also given us the ability to screen share so that we can collect signatures virtually, which has been a lovely feature. And then drafts and final copies of all paperwork, as always, are provided to parents. Right now, the majority of them are being sent via email. However, if hard copies are requested, we can give them. Case study evaluations are being done to determine whether or not students are still eligible or begin to be eligible for special education. These evaluations could be done fully remote if the district has enough data to make an eligibility decision. However, we have also researched and found ways to do some of our testing remote. Also, we have students who are coming in for planned appointments with our specialists to be done in-person testing situation. Of course, whenever students are coming in, we're following all of the safety protocols that were written for assessment and following all of the PPE and social distancing guidelines. Okay, well, so this is supposed to say.
It's up there. It's like, it's up there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the individual remote learning plans, this is a plan that is written in addition to the current IEP. So the IEP is the legal document that binds us to the services and the accommodations and the goals that we're providing for our students. The IRLP is an additional document to document any changes or accommodations or things that are needed to be done to meet the students' needs in the unique situation of a remote learning environment. So an IRLP includes student supports and parent and guardian supports. It also includes the goals that the student has and how they're being provided in terms of how much time is being provided, because the minutes may be different in a remote schedule versus an in-person schedule. We also talk about accommodations and whether or not additional accommodations are needed on top of the accommodations that are already in the IEP, given the unique setting. This is a plan that's reviewed with the IEP team and the parents, and the IRLP, like I said, it does not replace the IEP, it's an additional document so that we can make sure that a student has everything they need to be as successful as possible. But the IEP then resumes fully when the students return in person for 100% of their day.
As we move to bring more students back in Phase B, of course, student and staff safety is a #1 priority for us. So we do have all types of PPE accessible for our students and staff. We have clear face masks. This is really important for our students in speech and language therapy. So it's very critical that the student sees the speech therapist's mouth as well as that the speech therapist can see the student's mouth. We're going to be doing temperature checks and symptoms checks daily with students before they enter the building. We have plexiglass dividers for our tabletops to keep students divided, as well as staff and students when they're working together. We have gowns and gloves for staff. Many of our self-contained students are not yet potty trained. So there's an increase in bodily fluids and some of them need hand-over-hand assistance. So we're providing that PPE for safety for our staff. We'll have freestanding sanitizing stations and of course daily cleaning of all facilities. We'll have additional safety protocols in place as well. So we will be observing our 6-foot guidelines to the greatest extent possible. Students with one-to-one support, we will have the proper PPE in place, including the gowns and face shields and gloves if teachers need to move in and break that 6-foot distance. We are removing all fabric covered items from our classrooms. We will not be sharing any supplies between students when they're in in-person learning. We will have dirty and clean toy bins. So once a student uses an item, it will go in the dirty bin for cleaning before it can be redeployed to another student. We have signage and prompts for social distancing. We've created social stories for our students to help teach them about social distancing in a very kid-friendly way. And we have procedures for common spaces such as our bathrooms. We have specific bathrooms designated for the students to be utilizing, a cleaning schedule and a usage schedule so that we're not have too many students in the facilities at one time. Transportation, since there's no general education transportation up and running, we are offering special ed transportation to all students whose parents elected in-person learning. And then the transportation providers will be providing all the safety protocols. And just like during the regular school year, if a parent elects to drive or drop their child off to school, this is of course permissible. We're planning to have aides aboard our buses so that we can do temperature checks and certify before a student boards the bus so that we don't have any students arriving at school with fevers or possibly exposing a bus ride of students on the way to school. And that kind of concludes the information we had to share with you, and we are available for questions and any concerns you have.
Any board questions?
So I have questions. I don't know that you either A, know the answer, or B, if you don't know the answer, it's okay. I'm not expecting necessarily, but just thinking about this a little bit, right? So you talked about emailing information to persons. When that happens, are we doing that in a secure format? Or
Yeah, so the way that we email the PDFs from our Embrace system, which is our IEP software system, that's something that we did run by our attorneys when we adopted the new system, which was a little bit over a year ago.
Right.
So yeah, so we've gotten the clearance that we're in good shape there.
Okay. So really, you're using Zoom also.
Yes.
And there was an additional function about, signing off on functions, signing off on things and signing that sort of stuff. So that makes really good sense that we can do that. But is there an additional level of security for some of that information? Because I would think some of the information you have is probably health related as well. And so we have the HIPAA requirements that we have to maintain as well as school requirements.
Sure.
And
So
I don't, again, if I'm just asking
sure, yeah.
broadly.
No, I understand. So when we adopted the new Embrace system a year ago, these are some of the questions that they gave to us, that they reviewed with us in our overview. And so the safety and security of, it's a software format that's not like a separate app or anything. It's a web-based software. So there's built-in protections there. And with some of, for example, we have a Medicaid system that aligns with our Embrace system. And so in working with our attorneys specifically to just ensure that like our HIPAA compliance and all those pieces were accurate. So we sent them examples of what the process was going to look like to get their insight and ensure that we were set up in that regard. And so we were given a green light for that as well.
Okay. Somebody asked me, I'll look up.
So I had a question, and so it wasn't discussed, but I want to make sure, I want to go on to make the assumption, if there's a confirmed page when we reopen the Phase B, are we going to follow the same guidelines that were discussed as a part of our original reopening plan?
Yes. Yes. So
Contact tracing and
all the contact tracing, that's a great question. So we'll be following the IDPH guidelines, the local guidelines, the Lake County Health Department, and working closely. So Mr. McCreary has been instrumental in supporting us in that process. In addition, right now, because we've had the experience of students coming for driver's ed and athletics at the high school, it's been nice because we have some overlay in terms of what that process would look like or how it has looked to kind of do those processes of the contact tracing. So we will have that in effect. And in addition, we are requesting our attendance secretaries, myself, some additional administrators, the nurses, and Mr. Zaremba and others to complete a contact tracing course, which will then assist if it was just to expedite the timing more efficiently and for us to understand the process in the contact tracing, even though we are able at this moment in time to rely heavily on the Lake County Health Department. It just offers us the opportunity to be have that additional awareness.
So that team you just mentioned is trained to like deal with the situation and expedite the whole process. Is what
Sure,
you're
yeah.
saying.
Completing the training on how the contact tracing works as far as how we would close classrooms and what the cleaning would look like, all those procedures. We have gone over those and we'll review those further with our staffs. In fact, the nursing staff is meeting this Friday, and then the special education staff is meeting Monday to review that information with Mr. McCreary as well. But yes, we're following all those protocols.
Can I ask, because I know when we were discussing the initial plan back in July, and a lot of that was being discussed, and then a lot of the guidelines kept changing thereafter, and I know it's all changed, so we haven't really gotten a final like an update on where that is. So has that been more streamlined? I realize, except for this small group or those people who are going in, it hasn't needed to be widely communicated to all of the parents or to us as board members yet, but is that more streamlined and developed now?
So there have been some subtle changes, and I know Mr. McCreary could probably answer better, but there have been some subtle changes, and it's all very, very clear. And just earlier today, I was reviewing, like, for example, just one quick example, if a staff member has a chronic allergy, right, and so they wake up with that raspy throat, just looking at, like, what wasn't defined earlier in the summer is now clearly defined as far as what process that staff member would take to make sure the district was aware and that they were following safety protocols without necessarily having to quarantine for 14 days based on their typical allergy. So things like that have been ironed out further, and then otherwise a lot of it looks very similar. Mr. McCreary, would you agree? Am I missing anything you want to add on?
As you're coming up, then I'll continue that question though. You're saying that that's been ironed out. So is that available to the staff or to parents who might want to know what those protocols are and how we access them?
Right, so we're on version 4 of the update. There are still 4 primary classifications. There's if someone, a student or staff member falls ill in the building. There is if they fall ill at home and are reporting a symptom and they're not sure if they should come to work or not. There is they've been exposed to somebody who has confirmed having COVID, but they are asymptomatic. And then the last piece is if they've actually tested positive. The primary guidance still remains the same. That has been communicated, and that was part of our town halls and things. I have laid it out a little bit differently in version 4, just so it's easier to follow. But yes, that is available on both districts, 120 and 75's COVID page. Okay. And as we begin to have more communication to parents and families, that will be part of that. And then as on Monday morning, I sent an update to D75 staff identifying, trying to proactively answer some questions. And then as we get on, I'm afraid they're going to change it again before October 5th. So probably on October 1st, I will send whatever that looks like, be it the current version or yet another new version out to staff. So those will be the new ground rules. But they have tweaked it and refined it. The changes are becoming fewer and fewer as we have a protocol. And we have been able to apply that with success and working in collaboration with the Lake County Health Department.
I remember my other question. So out of the parents that chose one version or the other, was there a discernible issue that seemed to drive their decision? I mean, some of these students have other healthcare issues as well. Was that seemed to be a deciding factor or not?
Yeah. I think the largest group of parents that declined were ones in our Excel structured program. So those are our students with more severe autism who really struggle with changes in routines. And also had a lot of sensory issues. So they were very concerned about the change in the routine and that, right now it's half days, the possibility of it, us continuing to make another change to general ed, the masks being very challenging for them, the upset of seeing a classroom with plexiglass and some of those protocols. So that was probably my largest group of parents that ended up declining and wanting their children to remain remote, and those were the answers that they gave. And then probably the second group were those where parents themselves have medical fragile issues and were concerned about getting sick and exposure, and then students that were medically fragile. They were probably the second biggest reason when people kind of reached out to us and had questions that made them choose remote over in person.
Any more questions? Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
very informative.
Good evening, everyone. Just like the protocols that we have for COVID, we are bringing back the 2021 calendar, I think, for the fourth revision also. I guarantee you we will be bringing it back again. At the last board meeting, the board recommended some changes that clarified for us the direction, at least for this current calendar for 2021. As a result, what took place then is the February 12th date was removed from being a institute day, and we did retain keeping in session typical days that we take off for holidays, being Yom Kippur and Good Friday. And we've acknowledged that this is for 1 year only. Due to those changes, what that enabled us to also do was to decrease the actual end date that would include any emergency days. So in your folder is a calendar that does reveal that we're not in session on February 12th instead of the Institute Day, and our last day would be the June 10th if we use the emergency days. But if the board approves our e-learning plan tonight, then we can hopefully use our e-learning model, provided the power doesn't go out, and we can maybe not even need to use those days. So those are the changes on the calendar. You can anticipate when we use our remote planning days. We will be bringing it back to you also so that you know that those are in there, and then we'll have one more revision at the end of the year for any final change that may have taken place that would remove the emergency days. And that would be probably the April or May meeting, depending. Any questions regards to the 2021 calendar?
So how do we add, you say add the remote learning days?
We'll need to incorporate remote planning days. So the state provided all the public schools 5 remote planning days that can be substituted for student attendance days. Those are currently not listed on the calendar. The idea is if we need to go to a hybrid model, we'd like to front load some of those days like we did for the start of this school year to give our staff time to get more professional development and prep for bringing kids back into the building. Or if we needed to do an intermediate professional development day or planning for our staff in the hybrid model, remote model, to help us continue on to the rest of the year with using time. So we have 5 days we can still allocate that way.
So we haven't used any of the remote planning days, the 5 days that are allocated by the state as of yet?
Correct.
Okay. And that was similar in a different fashion, but similarly done when we ended in March, and then we thought we were going to have to use them, and then they said, never mind, they're not emergency days, and then we got to end earlier than we initially anticipated. So that if we don't end up with a hybrid, or you don't need any more remote planning days or whatever thrown in there, then potentially we'd end earlier, but that's all to be determined.
The remote planning days, the state has said, account for a student attendance day.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we use all 5 of those days, our end date stays the same.
Got it.
If we don't use the days, our end date still stays the same.
Okay.
The difference would be it's 5 less days of, up to 5 less days of interaction in whatever platform with our students. Does
So there could be 5 surprise days off for the kids at some point throughout the year, and you'll let us know when that is. Nobody knows. So
Yes.
Got it.
We'll definitely need to give our families enough planning ahead of time.
Just curious, and then when we get back to hopefully having a normal school year and we want to activate, or you want to activate the e-learning model, those days would be available to the district, or is this a special circumstance kind of allocation?
The remote planning days are a special allocation
Okay.
through the governor's executive order. So let's just fast forward to August. We're back to where kids are coming in the first day. We're all upset because bus routes aren't set right, but we're happy it's back. At that point, we could initiate the e-learning program, but we would not right now have those planning days available.
Okay.
So we would need to incorporate those through Teacher Institute days or looking at some of our half-day professional development days for our staff to utilize, to be prepared to use the e-learning.
But the idea is by approving an e-learning, we have this in our back pocket for future years to deal with snow days, like you said, all those other normal occurrences that prohibit kids coming into school.
Yes, correct. Okay.
Questions on the calendar?
Okay. Next one is the first reading for Press Policy 105. So at this point, I'd like to ask Lisa if you want to go over some of the highlights that we've had from your Wells from this.
Sure, I have
Please.
some notes and I'll ask Wells to pipe in, but basically the first reading, a lot of the policies, if you were to summarize it, are the result, if the policy changes and updates are the result of the U.S. Department of Ed in May releasing final Title IX regulations. The singularly most impactful output of that in our current press packet is the creation of a new policy. It's 2265. And then the rest, it was kind of like cascading, update referencing and things like that. So I hope you guys took that away from your hopefully preliminary review. There's a few straightforward yes/no questions that will depend on what we do. Examples would be, do we have assistant principals? Yes. Do we have a dean of students? No, things like that. The more complicated, and not complicated, but the more thought-provoking issues where we need to spend some time delving into our options were cited in the IASB materials where they request board attorney input. So we did ask for that, and we actually just got it today at like 3, and it was a 12-page document with exhibits. So 3 pages of text and then some exhibits. So I know Wells and I did a brief look at it, but we're not really in a position to summarize it for you. And we'll be happy to share that with you as well subsequently. Most of the comments that they returned were around the new policy 2265, as well as the equal opportunity policy update 710. So again, there'll be some options to talk through, and we'll share that with you. They've also included recommendations around not just the policies for us, but the administrative policies for the administration. So I didn't get a chance to look at that, but that would be curious, I'd be interested in what exactly they're recommending. And I think it's a good practice that we do that. I mean, I think this packet has been one of the first ones where they specifically call out attorney, counsel to be sought. So I think it's a good thing for that. We did have just a couple of follow-up questions. You may have noticed that it was just a result of our last press update. There was some discussion about the student behavioral student handbook, policy 7190. So we had some follow-up questions for the administration around, the status of the handbook, and some other guidelines that appear in status that are supposed to be made to the board, so we'll be looking for feedback on that.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to give that
I give some
tonight.
feedback now.
Okay.
So for some of the questions, A was highlighted, so it was something that drew attention to it in regards to 719, your student handbook. Reason I had it on there, it said we're to distribute it 15 days after the start of school year. And our practice has been through registration that the handbook does go out. What we do is not have a handbook that's specific for schools. Roughly 3 years ago, it was determined that there would just be one district level handbook that would go out, and then it would be posted on the website. As we've looked into that, and we've mentioned before, it was last updated in 2017, that handbook. So we do need to go through that process again of updating it, looking at having the parent input on it as we go through that. And I think we need to have the discussion, is there enough individuality amongst the buildings in regards to the discipline or how they handle that, that there would be separate books at a building level. That was a project we've been working on in light of the circumstances that we've been on. It is one of the items that we have put on hold right now. We do have a document that has been functional at least, so it's been posted, so that part has been done. But you can anticipate before we start next year, we would go through the process to update our handbook.
Any questions on that?
So I think that's fine. So I guess in terms of this other one, that's a major one, I think what I think we need is, you as the administration need to look at the stuff that the attorneys sent and the guidance and see which one matches up with what you think is appropriate, and then bring it back to us with a recommendation. And
okay,
you know, unless there's something really weird, you know, we'll probably say yes, that makes sense, because we're the ones that are going to have to implement it.
Yeah, and that's why I'd be curious, the administrative updates, what they're recommending for you guys as well.
Yep, we'll definitely be able to review.
And I didn't have a chance to look at them today, but I mean, there've been a number of court cases regarding this stuff, so.
We're fortunate enough that we have an individual that's all they did in their prior life.
There you go.
And then did you want to talk separately or just keep
Sure.
talking about the next item, which was the consideration of racial and educational equity policy?
Yep.
So likewise, there's, and actually it's in the introduction of the kind of summary that I think Wells and I wanted to make, again, reiterate what they said there, that, you know, we have samples that were kindly provided, but ISB really states that the importance of boards in relation to developing these type of policies is that while examples and templates can be provided, that they really should involve deep conversation by the board with not only just themselves, the administration and the community, and that everyone benefits when students, you know, are addressed, these concerns are addressed in a thoughtful and open way. So, and that we share, you know, kind of a collective responsibility for developing those policies and putting a lot of time and thought into it rather than just adopting somebody else's is good enough. So then the question would be, what are our next steps? Do we want to have, you know, what kind of conversation and dialogue about that and those type of issues?
So when it talks about engaging stakeholders in the community, is this something that you would do as far as a committee and having like some parents and I'd say students and, you know, board members participating?
Kind of what we need to decide, you know, how do we want to talk about these topics and with whom and
And the School Board Association has a workshop that they can offer us as well. So if we're going to do something like this, we need to do it broadly based. I guess only because I'm the only person I think that's here. Well, I know I'm the only person that's here that's on the board when we changed to grade centers. This is one of the main reasons we changed to grade centers. So that because we found that there were very wide differences in demographics and those kinds of things among the neighborhood schools that we had. And so we tried to do a lot of different things to address differences and, try as they might, they weren't really very successful. So we made the hard choice to go to grade centers. And there were a lot of people that thought that was a bad idea. But there were also a lot of people that thought it was the correct thing to do. And so we did that. And so in some ways, unlike the Skokie district that the draft or the policy was provided to us, I mean, that's a district of 7,000 students with, I think, 16 different buildings, 10 or 12 different elementary buildings. And there are vast differences among their demographics among those buildings. So, unlike somebody that's in that situation where they have to think about how do I address those differences, and do I do that with different class sizes, different services, different whatever. All of our students go to each building equally, no matter what their demographic profile is, and we staff not based on dollars or nothing, but based on the number of students we have. So that, again, I think is maybe people don't understand. That was one of the reasons we did that. Maybe we need to make sure we explain that better. But that's one of the 10 things that also the School Board Association talks about what the school boards can do. You need to make sure, because we control the dollars and the funding for different buildings, and so we need to make sure we're addressing that primarily. And then the other big question, I think, which the Evanston Township article talked about, which was the high school, is access to AP classes. Well, elementaries don't have AP classes, but we do have Big Ten math. We have some other things that are some ways elective, if you will, or students are asked to be part of or not, and how do we, how are we managing that? Because that's the other part of, maybe unintended consequences of how people interact with one another. So that, to me, seems to be, those are the issues that we have to think about. Because the big one in terms of where do people go to school, and trust me, close a school, open a school, you'll get a crowd. We kind of tackled that one, at least for a while, until we get to the point where we need more space, and then we'll have something different argument about it. That's just my 2 cents.
So one of the reasons you bring this forward is last year we were looking for potentially adopting a safe schools resolution, and one of the recommendations from the board was, what about developing your own policy? So upon seeing these two policies, it was seen as, from my vantage point at least, here's an opportunity that might be able to address what we thought were safe school policies to be developed, while also being able to address the racial and educational equity for our building. The reason we're pulling these two samples are because they're the only two that came up in press when we started digging in a little bit more. When I look at them, I'm thinking about the structure of the policies and looking at some of the key things to me when I see the differences, because they are vastly different than us. But in the Oak Park River Forest one, I think the things that I would ask for the board to be able to look at are how they define all the terminologies in there. That is very clear for what they view as far as bias, institutional racism, some foul words potentially, but that's what it means to the board and for school districts. So that provides a lot of clarity for how we would operate as an institution. It also puts in there some of the things for protocols, where they reference that. And I'd say as a board, those would be things I think we don't need to recreate. They're items for us to consider, for you to consider how it would be incorporated in the policy. So that was one of the takeaways from the Evanston one, or Oak Park River Forest. The Evanston Skokie model, the difference that I thought was helpful, when you look at that, it clearly delineates the responsibilities of the board and the superintendent of the schools. And then it goes through what they're committed to requiring, each of those items. That is also a very clear-cut way to make it, your admin, your future boards that come in, and your families that you're serving clear on what our priorities are. Which a lot is what, Wells, you're giving examples of how the board showed what priorities were, how we can make sure things are being done in a financial manner to meet the best needs of all our kids. So I thought these were just two really good samples to be able to use so we're not starting from scratch. As far as the process, I would agree with you that this is a process that we need to be able to take the time, and working with our community and the other stakeholders to create the policy that you think would be most appropriate for our district. It's certainly time to be able to do that, I believe. But before we get there, we've got to say that we want to create this kind of a policy. And I think that to me tonight is the first step. If this is the policy and kind of going these guidelines we want to create, I would ask that all of them say, yes, we want to do this now, or no. And then if it's a yes by the board, then I think Wells and Lisa, we can start putting together next steps.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yes,
I jumped to the assumption that he would do it, so.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely
I mean, as a board, we decided that we were all in agreement with the concept of the Safe Schools resolution, but we definitely made a commitment to those who came to our meeting and spoke to us about it, and we did say that we none of us disagreed with the concept. We felt it was better addressed as a policy. So I think we've already, unless anyone's changed their mind, I think, I would definitely agree with us continuing down that path, because that's what we had said we were going to do. And I'd like to see us do it, definitely.
So then if I heard you, we can follow up with the School Board Association and see what we can do to have support to go through this process then.
Would that imply kind of like a previous classroom that we did where we were told like a special closed meeting in order to do the training?
It would either be a training or they might suggest a facilitator to bring people in. Kind of the,
I don't think this can be closed. You can only do closed for self-evaluation.
And okay, that makes sense, because that was the board self-evaluation session, so that makes sense. Okay. And I think it makes more sense to have it open. I'm not suggesting it should be closed, because I think that's the whole point, is I think I think we need to announce that to the community, because I think, we may have students who want to be involved and, having their voices heard as well as parents. So I definitely think we should be opening that up. I just didn't know what the protocols were.
okay. So we'll follow up with school board, see what they can offer, and then be able to follow back up with you as a group.
So is there anything the policy committee can do for you guys as far as the next step with the regular press update? So we'll send you the feedback. There's a lot of attachments.
I'd be interested to see
kind of, you kind of gotta
Yeah.
have to read it to understand it. In fact, I read it once really quick before we came, and I was like, oh, yeah, I gotta read this again and again and again, just to understand the nuances of what the differences are in our choices for some of these policies. And some are just very straightforward, but there's a few where we really need to kind of digest what they've said. So.
I'd be curious to see that. But
One way. And I think I am really pleased with our upgrade to Cross Plus. There's been a little, we're finding out a lot of things about the system, because we're like, we saw that before. Well, that's because they hadn't updated it yet, so it still showed up as a to-do even though we did it. So, but this is a really good summary, the first page or two and a half.
Okay.
All right, any other questions about policies? All right, so I do believe the next step, does anybody wish to have any items removed or tabled either from the consent agenda for the board action items at this time? I should have said walls.
Well, somebody asked a question, and so I assume that somebody's gonna ask to remove, for the time being, the personnel report.
I don't know, does anybody want to have the personnel report?
My question was answered. I don't need to have it removed for that basis.
Okay.
All right, so can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda item?
I will move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Second.
I beat you.
He said-
It was too soft.
He thought you were
Sorry.
falling for a
I
second.
second.
but I understood. Okay, figurehead, aye. St. Clair.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
And DuPont and Holly are absent.
Okay. Awesome. So now we have the motions for the individual board action items. Did anybody see a need to tweak the language of what's being presented as motions? Okay, and I'm sorry, can we do these all at once or I do them
No,
separately?
do them separate.
Separate, okay. Okay, this,
So I'm good.
I move that the Board of Education, Mundelein Elementary School District 75, to accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the intergovernmental agreement COVID-19 relief fund with the county of Lake as presented.
Second.
Erickson.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Figurehead, aye. St. Clair.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
DuPont and Holly are absent.
I move the Board of Education Elementary School District 75 accepts the superintendent's recommendation to approve the tri-district agreement, intergovernmental agreement with Hawthorne District 73 and Fremont District 79 as presented.
Second.
Price.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. DuPont and Holly are absent.
I move that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to adopt the e-learning program as presented.
Second.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson.
Aye.
And Holly and DuPont are absent.
I move the Board of Education School District 75 accepts the superintendent's recommendation to approve the amended 2021 school calendar as presented.
Second. Price.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
And St. Clair.
Aye.
Holly and DuPont are absent.
Okay, so now the board will enter into executive session to discuss the employment, appointment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including testimony on any complaints lodged against an employee or the public body or against legal counsel for the public body. Any litigation or inaction against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or an administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be reported and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. And the discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for proposed approval of the body of minutes or the semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by appropriate sections.
Second.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Price.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson.
Aye.
And DuPont and Holly are absent. So I will note the time at 8:34.
Okay, we're
Okay,
recording again.
So I motion that we go back into open session with the calling of the roll at 8:52 PM.
St. Clair,
Here.
Gallegos,
Here.
Price,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Erickson.
Aye.
DuPont and Holly are absent.
All right. Too much paperwork. All right.
I move the approval of the settlement agreement with GCA Education Services and ABM Industries.
Second. Price,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Erickson.
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Holly and DuPont are absent.
I don't seem to have a copy of the
Yeah, I-
executive session.
Here you
I
go.
move that the Board of Education,
It's in the
Lisa.
addendum that you got emailed today.
Okay.
I move the Board of Education, Mount Line Elementary School District 75, accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the executive session minutes for July 14th, 2020 and August 18th, 2020.
Second.
Erickson.
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. DuPont and Holly are absent.
I move the Board of Education, Mount Line Elementary School District 75, accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the closed session verbatim records. Each straight is presented after September 22nd, 2020.
Second.
Erickson,
Aye.
St. Clair.
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
Price,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. DuPont and Holly are absent.
I move the Board of Education, Mount Line Elementary School District 75, accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the following closed session minutes, continue to require confidentiality, and are recommended to remain in the closed session file. Following closed session minutes were reviewed, and these minutes no longer need confidential treatment. July 16th, 2019, May 12th, 2020, May 15th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, Anna, I'm confused because there's two lines, one that says no longer requires confidentiality, one that says requires. So which one are we voting on? So I record the,
Or my understanding it's both, no? Unless you've decided to
There's two
table.
different motions.
There's two motions.
so I'm
Right.
just clarifying which one are we moving first?
At the last board meeting, we did this. You've asked that we put it in two separate motions versus just one.
Okay,
So we have to, that's why there's two there.
and I'm not disagreeing, I'm just
Yeah.
confused because when you just said, I thought you read the no longer requires confidentiality, so that's the one we're voting on?
Right.
And then we need to do another
The
motion.
one that-
Okay, I just
The
want to
one
make sure
fit
we
it
put
on.
it on the right
Okay.
line,
Contain
that's
the
all.
ones that are.
Okay.
need to be
Gotcha.
Okay, and so you were, okay, Erickson
Who's ahead?
moved, that's fine, I just want to, secretary trying to keep up, that's okay, okay. Did anyone second?
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is for the no longer.
No longer. correct.
Gotcha. All right.
That's why I
Even
was
I'm confused.
Okay, Erickson?
Aye.
Gallegos?
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Price?
No.
St. Clair?
Aye.
And absent, Holly and Robert, DuPont?
I move the Board of Education accept the recommendation to approve the following closed session minutes, continue to require confidentiality, and are recommended to remain in the closed session file. June 17, 19, August 20, 19, September 24, 19, October 22, 19, December 19, 19, December 21, 20, February 3, 20, February 25, 20, May 19, 20.
I will second. Price?
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson?
Aye.
Gallegos?
Aye.
St. Clair?
Aye.
Do President's prerogative this evening?
No.
Oh, you you.
Taking the prerogative?
That's fine.
Okay, so how soon are we gonna get an update on schools that are going back to hybrid, and when are we gonna have a date?
So I anticipate us having bring something back to for the October meeting. If we have something sooner, we would ask for a special meeting. Our second meeting is gonna be tomorrow with admin and you.
How do we get feedback from other stakeholders?
Right now, we're trying to get a framework put together, so we will be looking to incorporate a board member participating in different committees and looking at having focal groups of community members to go over the plans that we look at initially.
So we wanna make sure it's your committee, not the board's committee, right?
Yes, sir.
So that we won't have to worry about Open Meetings Act. Well, we won't have to worry about Open Meetings Act stuff as long as we don't have two board members.
Correct.
And keep minutes and all that jazz.
Yes, sir.
And I'll get with Kevin Holly to see how he would like to push out the exit slips this time. He didn't share that. There's,
I would say, are parents gonna be part of that committee? Just out of curiosity.
So I haven't met with them to talk through all that yet. The idea is, so trying to mirror what we're doing for both districts. So the idea is to have different committees. One, be a metrics focus. The second one would be a teaching, learning, bell schedule, transportation. A fourth one, building. Really, that's the cleaning, sanitation, frequency piece. And to have members on each of those to go through all of the questions people would have and the logistics to make it work. That group, those committees, we look to have the admin staff, board rep. And then the second part would be, once we have an idea of what to be able to propose, have parent focal groups be able to go through and talk those through with them before taking any kind of an action on those. So yes, it's just gonna be a little bit of time.
Nope, just trying to understand.
And I'm gonna go over that with the group tomorrow. So if you're watching, you got a preview of the meeting.
okay, so if there's no further business to come before the board, the meeting stands adjourned, and if someone will motion.
I will move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Fingerhut, aye. Erickson? Price?
Aye.
Cayuga?
Aye.
Sinclair, aye.
I'm anticipating.
Sorry.